All right, on the phone right now, we got the Woofa Goofa. Can I say the Woofa Goofa with the green teeth, or is it just the Woofa
You can say
Goofa?
Yamagama. You can say anything you want. You can call me anything you want. Just don't call me late for dinner.
It is the man who used to do it all night long in Boston at the old WBCN. It's Mr. Peter Wolf joining us right now. Thank you so much for your time, Peter. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on and sharing it with you.
You've got a book coming out tomorrow. I believe it comes out tomorrow, right? Or is that today?
Yes, it comes out on the 11th.
Yeah.
If the 11th is tomorrow, that's the day.
Yeah, and it's called Waiting on the Moon, Artists, Poets, Drifters, Grifters, and Goddesses. And
goddesses.
And
Yama
goddesses. Yeah, there's quite a few in there I'm gonna ask you about. But I want to ask you about the title, and you open up with a quote from Orson Welles saying, "I'm not such a fool as to not take the moon very seriously." And with the title, and knowing that you're kind of a night owl, does it have to do specifically that you're someone who lives at night?
Well, I do roam around at night. I am a nocturnal person. This is in part, if you hear some noise behind while I'm talking to you, it's because I'm up earlier than usual. I'm making breakfast as we speak. So I don't mean to be rude, but
No.
that's just the nature of it.
Can I ask real quick, what does Peter Wolf have for breakfast these days, if I may ask?
Well, I have a couple of strong cups of strong brewed. I brew it myself, black tea. So that gets me the caffeine, and then sometimes I can just have peanut butter or scrambled eggs, scrambled mine, whatever, whatever is along the way. Something just to kind of get me up and rolling and strolling. But the moon, in answer to your question, yes, I am nocturnal, and the moon does come out at night, and the moon has many powers, as we know, with the tides. Affects a lot of people. The word lunacy comes from the word moon, and the ancient Greeks considered the moon like a woman, and some women, at least the ones I know, only come out at night. So there you go.
So your muse, the moon is like your muse.
No, you got it 100% right. The moon is a muse that shines on many of us, and throughout ancient history, it was considered to have great powers, and many, myself included, believe it still does.
Well, like your friend Muddy Waters used to say about his music, the blues is not meant to be played during the day.
Oh, yeah. There's a chapter about me and my getting to be how I became friends with Muddy Waters, and he definitely was a man that woke it up at night, like most musicians do, because, we play at night. We don't get done till late at night. So the nighttime, or as John Lee Hooker said, nighttime is the right time to be with the one you love. You want the one you love. Oh, let that nighttime come in. So Ray Charles said it too. So I think there's some credence to that.
Now, how old were you when you first met Muddy and his band?
Well, I first saw them when I went to school in New York City at a place called the High School of Music and Art. And that was I was studying art in this high school. It was what they call a specialized high school. It was run by the city of New York. It didn't cost any, money, but you needed to take an exam to get in. And it was on 135th Street in Harlem. And it was basically just about 10 blocks away from the Apollo Theater, the great famous Apollo Theater. So I went to the Apollo Theater once a week to see the Apollo Amateur Show, followed by the Apollo Review. So I got to see people like James Brown, Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin, all the great comedians, Pygmy Martin, Moms Mabley. I got to see Wilson Pickett, the Motown Review. And that was really my college of musical knowledge by going to the Apollo. And then I got to go to Birdland, which was called the jazz capital of the world, where I saw such great people as Art Blakey, Clifford Brown, Lee Morgan, Bobby Timmons, Cannonball Adderley. And that was when I was still a teenager. So in New York, the drinking age was only 18 in those years. So I was able to kind of put a little peach fuzz underneath my nose and pretend I looked older. And there was no like photo IDs. You just needed a proof of age. So it wasn't difficult to get into these magical palaces of music.
And then when Muddy was playing in Boston, though, that's when you really got to know him. Like you hung out with him and his band, which had James Cotton and Otis Spann. How much older were you at that time?
I was 18, and
my God.
Muddy was coming to this coffee house called the Club 47, and I was so excited about it that I waited all afternoon for him to arrive. And this long black Cadillac comes up, followed by a station wagon. And I go, oh, my God, there's Muddy Waters sitting up front. And he was sitting there, and I ran up to him, and I said, Muddy Waters, welcome to Cambridge. Welcome to the Club 47. Man, I can't believe I'm meeting you. If there's anything I can do, And he thought I worked in the club. And so he said, well, yeah, you can start carrying some of this equipment. And so I did. And he just, assumed that worked in the club. Well, long story short, they had never really worked in a coffee house before, meaning they were just used to working in bars that sold booze. So when they found out that it only served coffee, I volunteered to get some booze for them, and which I did. And I happened to live only a couple of blocks away from the club. And it's all explained in the book.
Yeah.
But they end up in my apartment hanging out day after day. James Cotton was cooking, some down-home cooking for everybody. And so my apartment became the hangout pad for Muddy Waters and his band. And there I am, 18 years old, playing Muddy Waters records that he hadn't heard in about 15 years. So for me, it was, a great thrill that. And as time moved on, we became, closer friends, and I remain friends with him to the day he died.
I mean, there's so many people that you have experiences with in here. Bob Dylan being one of them. The Rolling Stones. Eleanor Roosevelt comes into play here.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so many. John Lennon and Van Morrison and. A lot of actors, and you do a few chapters where your former wife, Faye Dunaway, is featured, and you guys were married for 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little bit longer, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. I got to tell you, that seems surprising to me, only because of what your jobs were. Like you were at that time, you were constantly on the road with the J Geils Band, right? And she was she was a great actress, and she was very in demand, so she was also busy. I find it surprising it was able to last that long. I mean, it must have been tough. You must have spent a lot of time apart.
Well, we spent some time apart, but we had a really great marriage. We were both I think the thing that made it work was we were both totally committed to our own careers, and we were committed to supporting each other's careers. So when Faye had a break, she would come out on the road, and she loved hanging out on the road and, not wanting to be a movie star. Hardly anybody even recognized her. And she'd be back there with the crew drinking them under the table. And for me, if I had a break, if she was filming out in California, I'd jump on a plane and meet her. And so we try to spend as much time with each other as we could, but also respecting that we needed to be apart at times because the careers, caused us to have these separations. But that wasn't, really caused the problem. And it's funny because the two things I did not want to write about when I started this book with the publisher was my marriage to Faye, because I did not want to have a kiss and tell kind of book, which I avoided doing. And I didn't want to write about the J Geils Band because I just thought I was going to write a book about short stories of the different musicians and personalities that I got to meet throughout my life. And I try to make it so each chapter was like its own short story. So if you wanted to read about, say, like Alfred Hitchcock, How I Met Alfred Hitchcock, that would be its own short story. Or if you wanted to meet, How I Met, Van Morrison, that would be its own short story. But as time went by, the publisher and some of the editors felt that if you left out the Geils Band or left out Say, people would wonder why, and it might not feel complete. So I wrote about those two subjects in the chapters, and so they found their way in the book.
I would imagine through Faye Dunaway, you met a lot of movie people. You mentioned Alfred Hitchcock. That's a pretty funny story. I don't want to give anything away. Let's just say Alfred Hitchcock really puts you to the test, and what you did with your attire before meeting him, I thought was really funny. That's a great story in the book. And
oh, thank you.
That is really funny. And I don't know if I don't want to give anything away, Peter. I want people to read this stuff because the stories are so riveting. Like to me, it's one of those books, and it's been a while since I read a book like this that I can't wait to get all my stuff done so I can go back to the book. It's just.
Well, thank you.
Speaking of directors, you're a former roommate of the late great David Lynch, the director, and there's an incident that you describe, which I think was the catalyst of his vision. I don't know if we can talk about that or.
Well, I don't know if it was the catalyst of his vision, but it sure was something. I will mention. David and I lived together. We were both going to the same art school, and I was actually living on the river, sleeping on the Charles River, on the bank of the Charles River. I needed a place to stay, and long story short, as it says in the book, I ended up becoming a roommate with Dave, and he had this apartment that we shared, and one night I was lying in bed, and I heard this scream, and David, are you all right? And what apparently happened was he was brushing his teeth, and as he was going to put more toothpaste on the toothbrush, he realized that he had been brushing his teeth, and there was a half a cockroach on the toothbrush.
Oh, God.
And, oh, man, he just, flipped him out. So I don't know if that was one of the reasons for some of the weirdness in his movies, but it sure was a dramatic moment for him.
I mentioned a lot.
Me.
Yeah, I mean,
where there's one, there's another.
Yeah, there's a lot of great experiences in this. You relate to in this book, and I mentioned all these very famous people, but there's two people that wouldn't call them famous. I don't think anybody would really know who they are, and one of them is your Uncle Bernie, who I found to be. There's little bits mentioned here and there about your Uncle Bernie. I found him to be a fascinating character. And someone that really was full of advice, whether it's good or bad, someone who tried to guide you along your way.
Well, I thank you for bringing it up. There was much more about Uncle Bernie, but that got edited out, because we try to keep the book, not too big, but also on a certain style. But Uncle Bernie, for people who are listening, he could have been the archetype or the perfect character for Broadway Danny Rose. He loved show business, and he was the manager of the world's strongest man, a champion baton twirler. He was manager of a gorilla. He was a manager of people that spun, ventriloquists, everything. He had his office in the 42nd Street Automat, which was a restaurant. He always had a variety under his arm, a cigar in his mouth, and he also managed my father. And he got my father into all sorts of, wild things. And Bernie, Bernie loved show business, and there were people like that in those days, if people had seen the Woody Allen film, Broadway Danny Rose, that were just these guys that, loved to be in the business. And he was also not the most handsome man, shall I say, but he just had a way with women. And as a young kid, being 7 or 8, watching him put the call up ladies and put the charm, shall we say, was something maybe I hope to have picked up some of it because he was very known. He was known as a ladies' man, and he was an excellent award-winning dancer, ballroom dancer, and he won many contests when dancing was a big thing back in those years. So Bernie had a great effect on me, and I really adored the man.
Another person that people are probably unfamiliar with is a gentleman by the name of Ed Hood, who I find so far, and I haven't finished the book, but so far, to me, one of the most fascinating characters in the book. And the best way to describe him would be to call him a scholar.
Yes, never been to college and never really graduated high school. I moved into this funky apartment building. That's where Van Morrison and I would hang out. And it was mostly filled with artists, writers, poets, things. And Ed Hood lived there, and he was a tutee at Harvard University. And he ended up basically teaching me what I knew about great novels, poets, literature, how to read a book, how to understand symbolism in a book. And so he also had another life other than his academic life. He was starred in many of Andy Warhol's films, My Hustler, Chelsea Girls. And so when I'd go visit his house, there'd be all sorts of people there, like from Del Shannon to Andy Warhol to these incredible people. So he became a very, very close friend of mine, and I have a whole chapter on Ed in the book.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters. It's just such a colorful chapter, and he is such a fascinating person. And there's a really interesting fact about his prom date. Again, I won't say anything about it. People are just going to have to read the book because it's really great. It's a great memoir, Peter, and it's done in such a different way. It's like an autobiography, but your experiences. It's not dates and times. There's a little bit of that in there. But it's really done in a great way, and these little stories are fantastic. I mean, like I said, even people like Ed Hood and Uncle Bernie to Bob Dylan, and the Stones and stuff. Every one of them, the stories are just interesting. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you for promoting it for me, and letting people know we'll be up at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, if they want to travel out and come out, and we're going to be doing a talk and about the book and selling the book. So people are willing. I would love to see everybody out there, and I really appreciate you taking the time to read the book and helping me let people know it's out there.
Yeah, it's a great read. And before I let you go, I have one last question about someone in the book. If you know, whatever happened to Joyce Fortunato?
Oh, mercy me. Let me tell you. When love comes once, you got to grab it fast. When I loved Joyce, man, I thought it was always going to last. That's a funny one. That's a great story. And I think that one is best left for the reader to find out. That was the first time I decided. One thing I will let the listeners know, that's the first time I decided I seriously was going to get married. And it's all about how my marriage plans got debunked. So I go into great detail at that. So a lot of lost love is in that book.
Yeah. The end of the Joyce Fortunato chapter, though, I'll just say this without giving anything away. It's a great ending. That's all I got to say about that. People got to read the book, man.
I thought so too. And if you knew or saw Joyce, you would think so too.
Yeah. The way you described her,
she was a bombshell.
Yeah,
boy, I tell you.
Yeah. All right. Well,
double trouble. Well, thank you so very much. And also, there's an album brewing. It's about 80% done, and hopefully it'll be out in the late spring. So keep your eyes out, and then hopefully we can talk about that, too, as that comes down the pipe.
Absolutely, Peter. Would love to talk to you about that. Looking forward to that also. All right, man.
And I love that radio voice of yours. No, seriously. I can always hear it when somebody has that talent. It's rare, but when they have it, You got it. So thank you.
Well, I gotta thank Philip Morris and Jack Daniels for widening the pipes.
Oh boy, I know what you mean.
Right.
I know what you mean.
as a one radio man to another. All right, man.
There you go.
Well, thank
all
you,
right,
Peter.
let the good times roll. If it's in you, it's got to come out, because that's what rock and roll is all about, doing the tune and getting right through it, having some fun until the midnight sun. Yama, gama, goomer, and thank you.